early to vote, but we agreed to meet when he returns to Nairobi. The other stakeholders we interacted with include the National Police Service of Kenya, ambassadors of the East African Community in Kenya, commissioners of the National Human Rights Commission, commissioners of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, political parties, the Election Observation Group, ILOG, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, and the media. We also had consultations with other regional and international observers. Many of them are already here. I attended a special event organized by the Kenya's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by Secretary Rachel Omamo, organized by 4 observers. The Secretary of ICT, Honorable Joseph Mucheru, the Inspector General of Police, Hilary Nzioki, permanent secretaries from several ministries were present. They spoke about Kenya government's preparedness and readiness to ensure successful, free, and fair election in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to present the preliminary report of the East African Community Observer Mission. The report is based on the consultations which I have already mentioned and the findings of our observers in the field, in the counties. We observed key pre-election and election day activities, campaigns, delivery of polling materials, preparation of polling stations, voting processes, and results management at polling stations. The comprehensive report, the detailed comprehensive report, will be completed shortly and will be delivered to the Independent Electoral and Border Commission of Kenya and to relevant Kenyan authorities. The following are some of the observations the EAC Election Observation Mission would like to highlight. 1, the mission observed that the campaigns were conducted in a calm and peaceful atmosphere. Parties and candidates had the opportunity to campaign freely, although there were reports of some challenges or incidents encountered by some parties and some members. In our assessment, these were isolated incidents. They do not translate or reflect the whole election processes. And those issues that were incidents related to security were dealt with by the national security agencies. 2, the mission takes note of the important contribution made by several stakeholders like faith-based organizations, civil society organizations, the private sector, and the media, which helped in promoting peace and harmony during the campaigns as well as before and on polling day. The mission noted that at various stages of the electoral process, there were problems associated with social media, particularly regarding to disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech. The mission commends various stakeholders for their efforts to address these challenges. In this regard, the mission commends the mainstream media for the important contribution they have made in addressing some of these challenges. We also commend the wonderful work they have done on voter education and coverage of the electoral process. We hope they will continue to do so after the election results are declared. The mission takes note of the remarkable improvements made by the Independent Electoral and Border Commission with regards to transparency, preparations, and management of the 2022 elections. However, much more needs to be done for better outcomes in the future. A lot of our ideas will be contained in the detailed report. The mission also recommends that in future there should be better communication between the IEBC and the various stakeholders. 5, on polling day, the mission observed the following. This is what we want to share. There are many things, but we would like to share the following. Generally, the situation was calm, peaceful, and orderly. Most polling stations opened on time, but there were a few which, for various reasons, including late setting up of the stations, late arrival of polling materials, or even late arrival of the polling officials. However, we were pleased to note that the time lost was compensated by the late closure of polls in the concerned polling stations. It is recommended by our mission that the IEBC should take corrective measures to ensure that these deficiencies do not recur in future. For example, we took time with my deputy to go around the polling stations up to 6 o'clock. There was nobody. I think in one of the stations we found 2 young ladies there pulling benches. So if the preparations are taken well ahead, then we'll be able to organize better. In the observed polling stations, security personnel were present as promised, and they were professional in their discharge of duties and responsibilities. They did not interfere with the electoral process, nor did they intimidate voters. The mission commends Kenya Police Service for a job very well done. Our humble appeal to them: please continue to do the good work everywhere, anywhere, and for every task you are assigned to do after the elections. The other observation on polling day is that polling officials displayed high levels of competence and professionalism. There may be some slippages here and there, but generally they displayed high levels of competence and professionalism. The mission recommends that the IEBC for the selection and training of poll officials. We also commend the IEBC for involving young people, and for that young women, in the management of the electoral processes. My deputy was very keen on seeing if the women are involved, and she was very happy to see many young ladies involved in the process. There was a time I asked her, but you are a mother, you also have girl child and boy child, but why are you not keen on seeing boys there? But it is a reality that you have to, and gender mainstreaming, you have to care about the place of women. They are disadvantaged. The mission commends the IEBC on the successful use of technology in voter registration, voter identification, and transmission of results. It has improved efficiency and increased transparency of the election process in Kenya. At least those who have been here in the last election are testifying to that. However, there are instances of challenges in the identification of voters using the KIMS kit. We recommend that the problems relating to KIMS kit should be identified and the necessary corrective measures be taken for better performance in future elections. The mission was pleased to observe that agents of political parties and candidates were present at polling stations and were not encumbered in performing their duties. However, it was a bit concerning that it was only the two major political parties, political alliances, that were able to deploy agents. Also, it was intriguing to note the presence of many agents of independent candidates. You know, I think there was one polling station, I think the representatives of the mainstream parties were only two. 6 of them were, you which party? Independent. Which one? Independent. Which one? Independent. So I says, it appears there are many independent candidates. It's good for democracy. But there is a story behind it. And we are going to take up that matter in the main report or observation. It appears something happened in the primaries in the political parties. Those who were dissatisfied just decided to become independent candidates. In all polling stations observed, agents of political parties and independent candidates signed the results form, declaration form, and they were given copies. Overall, the mission was pleased to note that generally protocols and procedures for opening and closure of polling were observed. With regards to the layout of polling stations, it is the opinion of staff and community observers that party agents were placed too far from the polling official who is identifying the voters. For purposes of enhancing checks and balances in future elections, the IEB should consider placing party agents close to that official to ascertain the authenticity of voters. Because if these party agents, in fact, in the arrangement, the party agents would be where the observers are supposed to be. The only thing they would see is how these people drop the ballots in the boxes. But I think the most critical part for them is at the point where voters are coming in, to ascertain that is this a qualified voter or not. So if everything is safe, fine. But this is something that we thought was not suitable for us. The mission noted with concern complaints made by young people that the political parties did not provide them adequate space and opportunity for them to participate as candidates in the elections. We met some young people here. They were so vocal, complaining. They are making demands on us. Times they tell us, you are too young, please, just wait. Yes. Even getting the opportunity to try. So it's a hard sell. We consider this a serious matter. Either it's a matter of omission or commission, which needs attention and resolute action. Young people. In the same vein, we call upon the political actors and the government of Kenya to ensure that the 2/3 gender rule is observed to the letter and spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, over and above all that I've mentioned, the Staff and Community Election Observation Mission would like to appeal to all political actors and stakeholders in Kenya, including the great people of Kenya, to continue to maintain peace after the results of the elections are declared. We implore all of you to embrace peaceful resolution of disputes that may arise from the electoral processes. Fortunately, there is the opportunity to use the courts of law, so please make use of that avenue. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the East African Community Election Observation Mission is satisfied that the way the 2022 general election, Kenyan general election was conducted on polling day, the people of Kenya were given the opportunity to elect leaders of their choice freely. We hope the subsequent processes will respect, uphold, and reflect the will of the people of Kenya in the 2022 general elections. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Another round of applause. That wasn't enough. So next, we'll have the presentation from Intergovernmental Authority on Development by His Excellency President Mulatu Teshome. Welcome.
Your Excellency, President Ernest Koroma, Excellency President Jakaya Kikwete, distinguished former presidents, Excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, I will hereby present the preliminary statement of the IGAD Election Observation Mission to the 9 August 2022 general elections in Kenya. At the invitation of the IEBC of the Republic of Kenya, the Executive Secretary of IGAD, His Excellency Dr. Waangalizi, authorized the deployment of an IGAD election observation mission to observe the general election in the Republic of Kenya. I led a 31-person mission. The mission is comprised of 7 core team members and 24 short-term observers drawn from 6 IGAD member states: Djibouti, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and Uganda. The 24 STOs, or short-term observation members, out of which 11 are women, represent election management bodies as well as public and diplomatic services. The SCOs were deployed to 19 constituencies across 10 counties: Nairobi, Nakuru, Nyeri, Uasin Gishu, Kajiado, Kisumu, Kisii, Kakamega, Machakos, and Mombasa. Since my arrival in Kenya on 2 August 2022, I held wide-ranging engagement with national stakeholders and senior officials, including the Cabinet Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Chairperson of the Commission of the IEBC, the 2 front-runner presidential candidates, domestic observer group representatives, as well as heads of other regional, continental, and international election observation missions. Ladies and gentlemen, in all my engagements, I underlined IGAD's keen interest to see the will of the Kenyan people fully realized through a credible and peaceful election processes. I also underscored the positive implications of the peaceful transfer of power in Kenya for the wider stability and domestic transition across the IGAD region. So it is not only for Kenya, but beyond, to the region itself. There were regular consultations and unity of voices among the various African missions, namely the African Union, COMESA, EAC, and IGAD. I would like to state my satisfaction with the level of collaboration and express my hope that this commendable practice will be sustained in future missions. IGAD Election Observation Mission's assessment of the 2022 general election in Kenya is based on the principles and standards of the conduct of domestic elections as enshrined in relevant regional. Given that the IGAD Election Observation Mission is a short-term mission, the scope of this mandate is mainly limited to observing election day activities pertaining to polling, counting, and tallying procedures. The observers have undergone a two-day orientation program on the political context of election relevant to national and international legal frameworks guiding election administration, as well as IGAD guidelines and code of conduct for election observers. They were also equipped with election observation checklists to gather and transmit their findings to the mission's secretariat. The mission is grateful for the warm welcome and cooperation it received from all Kenyan institutions and citizens, including election officials, candidates, and domestic observer groups. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I want to start with general remarks. Based on the information obtained from the IBC, we noted that there were 22,120,458 registered voters and 16,098 candidates in the 9 August 2022 general elections. They are vying for a total of 1,822 seats for 6 categories of elective positions. These elective positions are presidential, members of the National Assembly, women representatives in the National Assembly, members of the Senate, governors, and members of the county assemblies. The 2022 general election is widely considered as significant as it entails the transfer of presidential power. This, coupled with legacy of past electoral processes, adds to its importance. This is evident through the relatively high number of national and international election observation missions. We have taken note of key legal frameworks governing elections in Kenya, including the 2010 Constitution, and IGAD EOM has attended several briefings sessions organized by the IEBC and was able to appreciate the Commission's preparedness. Excellencies, let me proceed to the specific observation we found. Regarding pre-election observation, IGAD short-term election observation covered 213 polling stations across 19 constituencies located in the 10 counties where the IGAD observer mission was deployed. On 8 August, the day before the election, or at the eve of the general election, our short-term observers had all reached the various deployment locations, identified polling stations, and engaged with polling officials and other stakeholders in order to ascertain the level of preparedness. A more notable decision recorded concerning preparations on 8 August was the IEBC's announcement of 2 gubernatorial elections in Mombasa and Kakamega due to the errors of ballots. The statement by the IEBC on the cancellation caused anxiety and uncertainty pertaining to electoral processes in these 2 counties. Regarding Election Day observations, most of the polling stations where IGAD SCOs were able to observe opening procedures across the 10 counties opened on time. Secrecy of the ballot was adhered to in most polling stations. However, there were some instances when the positioning of the booth could have compromised the secrecy of the ballot and the electors. Regarding voter turnout, in most of the polling stations visited, voter turnout was noticeably low and recorded at around 55%. On polling stations and election day materials, the IGAD election observation mission notes that in all polling stations visited, requisite polling materials were available throughout the day. In some polling stations, the observers noted that limited number of polling booths slowed down the voting processes and procedures. All polling stations were, with few exceptions, observed were accessible to all voters, including persons with disabilities, and special consideration was also given to the elderly, lactating mothers, and pregnant women. On the polling staff, independent observers, and party agents. The short-term observation missions of IGAD observed that in most polling stations visited, polling officials performed their duties diligently in accordance with the laws and electoral regulations of Kenya. There was also a commendable level of representation of women as IEBC officials in most polling stations visited. Most of these are within the youth category, which signifies youth participation in election management. The representation of women among party agents and domestic observers was significantly high and noticeable, and that is very much commendable. The IGAD EOM observers noted the presence of domestic and international observers in most polling stations visited. On security around polling stations. The presence of security officials around the polling stations provided a secure environment for the elections to be conducted in an orderly and peaceful manner. The women security officers were also visibly present in all polling stations visited. There were no causes of harassment and intimidation observed. On closing of the poll, the IGAD Election Observation Mission observed that IEBC officials complied with the closing procedures adequately. Most of the polling stations observed closed on time. However, in few polling stations, closing time were extended to allow voters in the queue to cast their votes. In polling stations where IGAD Election Observation Mission observed closing, they also observed the counting procedures and processes in a very peaceful manner. In conclusion, the IGAD Election Observation Mission was deployed mission which is focused largely around the conduct of the electoral process on the election day. We note that we released the preliminary report. IEBC is yet to announce official results. The IGAD Election Observation Mission commends the Kenyan people for the passions and commitment they have shown in participating in the general election in a peaceful, open, and orderly manner. Overall, IEBC's preparation was visibly strong, and its election management performance by all means and by all measures has been commendable. For example, we noted the functionary and robust nature of technology to manage voter verification and transmission of results has been an area of concern in previous elections. In this election, voter verification and transmission of results and use of the KMS kit has largely been effective. The representation of women and youth representation as poll officials was also particularly commendable. Some of the areas of improvements we have noted that we intend to reflect in our final report are improvements in the setup of polling stations and positioning of booths to ensure secrecy of the ballots, as well as the need for provisions for adequate booths in stations to avoid long lines and risk of voters marking the ballots before they have a chance to access the booths. We have also noted the need to strengthen due diligence measures in ensuring polling materials production and delivery is done accurately to avoid the kind of disruption that was witnessed in some polling stations. The judiciary's role was visibly and very visible in handling election management related cases and boosting public confidence up until election day. One of the cases we observed was the cases regarding use of manual register. We consider the public trust that the Kenyan judiciary commands as a concrete achievement in terms of the consolidation of democracy in the Republic of Kenya. I end my the presentation here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, President. His Excellency Mulatu Teshome, for the presentation. Another round of applause for him, please. The African Union is the mother of all the regional economic communities in Africa. So I'd like to invite His Excellency Ernest Bai Koroma, the head of the AU COMESA Observer Mission, to come and give the presentation on behalf of the AU COMESA Election Observer Mission. Your Excellency, please.
Your Excellencies, former presidents and prime ministers who are heads of mission, heads of other international missions, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, honorable members of parliament, distinguished guests, members of the press. The mission thanks the government of Kenya for inviting the African Union and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, to observe its August 2022 general elections. It also expresses its appreciation to the various stakeholders that took their time to meet and consult with us, which helped deepen our understanding of the context and the conduct of the electoral process. The African Union, COMESA, and the East African Community initially deployed a joint pre-election assessment mission from the 15th to the 21st May 2022, followed by the election expert mission from the 25th June to 25th July 2022. ESA continued to collaborate in the engagement of the 2022 electoral process in Kenya by officially launching a short-term observation mission on the 4th August 2022. The mission was led by myself, assisted by Ambassador Marie-Pierre Lloyd, a COMESA Council of Elder member, former President Domitian Ndayizi, and Ambassador Bankole Adeoye. It comprised 93 observers, including independent electoral experts and a technical team. On election day, our teams covered the opening and closing process in 504 polling stations in 38 of the 47. I wish to take this opportunity to clarify that this statement is preliminary. It presents the mission's key observations and findings from the time of its deployment to election day. it is being issued while tabulation and announcement of election results are ongoing. Therefore, it is not an overall final assessment of the electoral process. The mission will continue to observe the results management process and resolution of electoral disputes, if any, and will issue a final report which will contain detailed recommendations for improvement of future elections in Kenya. The key findings. Our key findings are the 9th August 2022 general elections were highly competitive, and the campaign was comparatively more peaceful than previous elections. There was a notable shift from ethnocentric presidential campaigns to issue-focused campaigns. The legal framework governing elections in Kenya was largely adequate for the conduct of credible and democratic elections. In particular, the judiciary played a critical role in guaranteeing the right to a fair and expeditious hearing, which increased citizens' trust and confidence in the electoral process. This was evidenced by the willingness of to approach the courts for adjudications. However, last-minute election-related litigations and court decisions necessitated procedural changes which posed a risk to the smooth implementation of electoral operations. The IEBC had limited time to communicate and implement the changes. There was a notable improvement, especially recently, in the IEBC's strategic communication with stakeholders through periodic briefings and social media updates. The IEBC changed its technology in the 2022 elections. Specifically, it introduced additional voter identification verification features in the Kenyan Integrated Election Management System, KIMS, to provide a biometric and alphanumeric identification of voters on election day based on lessons learned from the 2017 elections. The changes in the KIMS ensured the capture and transmission of images of duly completed presidential election results from the polling stations to the National Tallying Center. As a result of these changes to the results transmission system, the provincial presidential elections results were publicly accessible on the IEBC portal. The mission welcomes introducing this transparency to improve the integrity of the electoral process. Although stakeholders had initial concerns about the risk posed by the lack of mobile network coverage in 1,111 polling stations, the IEBC put measures such as using satellite phones to facilitate the transmission of results. The mission noted that within 24 hours of the close of polling, over 95% of the polling stations had transmitted presidential results from forms 34A to the National Tallying Center. In line with the AU Election Observation Mission's recommendations in 2017 elections, the IEBC was more deliberate this time in stakeholder engagement. Specifically, the mission notes the IEBC's made efforts to strategically communicate with stakeholders through periodic briefings and the use of social media. Furthermore, the IEBC engaged political parties and candidates to promote peaceful elections by signing a peace pledge for the 4 presidential candidates. The mission was informed about the untimely availability of funds to the IEBC by the National Treasury. This impacted the effective implementation of electoral process, such as voter registration, verification of voters' register, and voter education. For instance, while the IEBC accredited several civil society organizations to complement its efforts in conducting voter education, the mission observed that this commenced late and was not comprehensive. The AU COMESA EOM noted that despite the relatively high young population, there was low youth registration in the 2022 elections. Only 39.84% of the total registered voters were youths, a decline of 5.17 from the 2017 figures. Stakeholders consulted by the mission attributed the low youth participation to the general conception that vote in elections, lack of trust and confidence in the political system, and the youth's unemployment and poverty, particularly in the face of in Kenya today. The mission acknowledged the efforts made by the IBC to audit the voter register to enhance its accuracy, competence, and to build confidence among the stakeholders. Assessment by KPMG auditing firm highlighted key findings arising from voter register. This relates to the transfer and voter detail update process, register of voter database, and system controls inclusiveness in the registration of voters, and made recommendations to address the reported findings. Although the IEBC was to update the voter register, there were still concerns about duplications and deceased persons on the register. The 2022 elections witnessed high level of participation of political parties and independent candidates. Out of the 90 registered parties, 81 contested the elections. Of the 16,105 candidates, 28.1% were independent. Many independent candidates were reportedly dissatisfied with the candidate selection process within the political parties. Notwithstanding this, The party primaries in the 2022 were reportedly more peaceful than in 2017. The campaign environment was vibrant and largely peaceful. Political parties and candidates used various campaign methods such as mass rallies, door-to-door distribution of campaign materials, and mainstream and social media, amongst others. The campaign messages were centered around socio-economic issues rather than on ethnic basis, as it was in the past. While the campaigns were largely peaceful and issue-based, hate speeches, misuse of state resources, non-adherence to campaign schedules, violence, and the use of criminal gangs were observed. The misuse of state resources created an unlevel playing field, especially for smaller political players. Likewise, the non-adherence to political campaign schedules caused clashes amongst supporters. For example, in Murang'a and Nyeri counties, the mission's long-term observers witnessed clashes between Jubilee Party and the UDA supporters during campaign rallies, resulting in violence, injury, and destruction of property. Further, the political use of criminal gangs to target political opponents by creating political zones of influence inhibited free campaigns, especially for women candidates. Freedom of the press was constitutionally guaranteed and ensured. This was seen in practice during the electoral process as media outlets had the space to carry out their duties. However, the effective misinformation and disinformation from social media platforms on peace and stability among many stakeholders. Kenya's vibrant civil society monitors and observed key electoral processes, advocated for electoral reforms, and conducted civic and voter education campaigns. The mission appreciated the civil society's role in the electoral process and in promoting peace and stability in the country. The mission noted the active involvement of various civil society organizations in the electoral process. The mission appreciates the CSOs also deployed observers and monitors throughout the electoral process. The joint AU-COMESA EOM visited 504 polling stations in 38 counties across the country to observe the opening, voting, closing, and counting processes. Of these, 59% were in the urban areas and 41 in the rural areas. Overall, the atmosphere was largely peaceful. The election day operations were reasonably well conducted and orderly and professional. The polling staff mostly adhered to polling procedures. However, some of the stations observed by the mission did not open and close on time. In some cases, the opening was delayed by more than 2 hours, and some of the reasons for the delay included problems with the Kenyan Integrated Elections Management System, the KIT, and the late arrival of polling staff and materials, and poor preparation of the polling stations. Conclusion. Though highly competitive, the 9th August 2022 general elections were conducted in a comparatively peaceful environment. Some procedural changes made enhance the process transparency in accordance with Kenya's legal framework and regional and international obligations and commitments for democratic elections. The joint AU COMESA election observation mission commends the authorities and people of Kenya for their efforts towards holding successful elections and deepening democratic rule, which is a prerequisite for sustainable socio-economic development in the country. While the process is still ongoing and results management process is underway, the mission encourages all stakeholders to continue with efforts towards building a peaceful and inclusive society. It further encourages political tolerance and peace cultivated among citizens in the remaining phase of the electoral process. Recommendations. And these are preliminary recommendations based on what we have observed and what we expect moving forward. In the spirit of cooperation, in furtherance of peace, credible and democratic elections in Kenya, the mission offers the following preliminary recommendations. We urge Kenyan citizens to remain peaceful while waiting for the conclusion of the electoral process. We urge the IEBC and other state institutions with a mandate on the elections to continue conduct their responsibilities with the utmost diligence and transparency, as well as compliance with the legal framework of Kenya. Lastly, we urge all stakeholders and citizens to pursue any grievances that may occur peacefully through the legal channels. I thank you for your attention.
One more round of applause, please. I'd like to recognize the presence of two dignitaries. The head of the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission, His Excellency Bruce Golding, and Ambassador Moi Lemoshira, the Director of Political Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kenya. Now, we go to the question and answer session for the media. This was a media briefing. We'll take 5 questions. So you tell us the media house from which you come, your name, your media house, and then your questions. We'll take 5 questions. The microphones, please. You take all the questions at once, and then you tell us to whom your question is directed to. No questions? have questions from the media? Yes, I can see hands there, please.
President Koroma, my name is Sarah Kimani from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. We've spoken about allocation of funds to the IEBC being low or coming in late to the extent that they were not able to conduct voter education. Did they tell you if they should have, did you try to find out if there were ways they could have conducted voter education as a priority, because there was barely no voter education, and probably this is the reason why we saw low voter turnout. And to President Kikwete, is the low voter turnout a concern, considering in 2017 we had 78% turnout, we're not talking about 56.4%. Do you feel that the will of Kenyans will be well represented when the numbers are so low?
My name is Philip Murutu, TV. I would wish to know for the issue, have you taken time to interrogate the postponement of elections in some of the regions, and probably the reasons given by the electoral agency? Thank you.
Next. Next question, please.
My name is Kisa Wandera from BBC News. My question is President Koroma. Among the observations by the Joint AU COMESA mission, you say you observed misuse of state resources, use of political violent groups, as well as non-adherence to political campaign periods, during especially the campaign period. Have you had this conversation with the IEBC, and are there concerns in any way that this will affect how results will be received in the country?
Next question.
My name is Kamara Ngume from NBS Uganda. My question is, this is to President Jakaya Kikwete. You say that you are satisfied with how the elections were conducted. So would you say that this was a free and fair election? I didn't hear you say that in your statement. So would you consider this a free and fair election despite a few incidents that happened? And then to Doctor, you say there was a misuse of state resources. Could you be a little more specific? What resources were these that were misused? Is it money? Is it, if you could be a little more specific?
Those are three. Next. So one more here, then we close, then the next you can answer.
I'm Dwight from Register. My question goes to any of the head of mission. We understand that there was failure by teams to identify voters. To what extent has this affected voter turnout? At the same time, the young people did not come to vote. Perhaps from your engagement with them, what are the issues that they are raising? Reasons as to why they are not coming out to vote.
So thank you for those questions. The Excellency, whoever is ready can come and start. Can start and answering the questions from here, from the podium.
I think there are 5 questions that that were directed to me. Is low voter turnout a concern to you? Yes. Because you expect in every election to have better voter turnout. So if the voter turnout is lower than the last elections, why it has happened is the case. It's a matter that we said, well, in the final report, we'll try to look at it. But the Kenyans know it better, probably than us. But I remember when we visited one of the constituencies here, at the polling stations, in Starehe, I think, somewhere. I was asking the presiding officer there, I said, how is it? He said, the voter turnout is low. He says, if we can get to about 50, we'll be lucky. I asked him, why do you think is the case? He says he can't know, but maybe there is apathy. Why there is apathy is a matter that we need to sit down and dig into it better. Otherwise, it would be unfair for me to just give sweeping answers. It's a matter that was observed last minute. So when we sit down and write the final report, we'll try to delve into the possible reasons for it. Because we were also concerned with lower registration of young voters, new voters. They were expecting to get 6 million, but only 3 million was turned up. Why is that the case for the young people? Again, it's a matter that we've got to sit down and do a deep analysis, but probably there is apathy. Probably they have issues of concern that maybe they think the participating in elections is not a worthwhile exercise. But if with all instances, it's something that really the issues have got to be delineated and proper measures should be taken to make sure that there is more participation, more interest in young people to participate in the democratic processes. Have you taken time to interrogate the postponement? Yes, we asked, and we were told there was mix-up of the ballot papers, a number of issues. Well, it happens, but it's unfortunate that it has happened. And for these some of the lessons that in future they should know it better, because unless it is top secret, but how do you transport ballot papers that are wrong? Yes, these are some of the areas where the IEBC needs this. I thought you look into the ballot papers. Are these ballot papers going to the right place? So when you get wrong ballot papers, wrong names, these are some of the issues that we need. There was a slippage there, and we hope the Electoral Commission will learn from this lesson and do it better. Are you satisfied? You said you are satisfied. Will you say the elections are free and fair? We said we are satisfied with the election process, the voting. The voting. People turned up, the polls, the lines were there. There were no problems in the lines. The disabled were assisted. People were allowed to go into the door. There was no commotion, there was no confusion, at least in the 218 polling stations that our people observed, that including me, I'm one of the observers here in town. We saw that. We saw the verification. There are challenges, some of course we saw when somebody puts his or her finger and it does not read properly, is told to maybe there's so much oil there, please clean up, they clean up, they do it again, doesn't show, then they take photographs. At least those who had problems with identification and they were bona fide voters at that polling station, measures were taken to make sure they don't lose that opportunity. They take photographs. So we have seen it happen. But the other thing, the good thing we saw is that they were given other methodologies and ways were deployed to make sure that they don't lose the opportunity to vote. And those who are not supposed to vote at that particular polling station, they were advised, you are not here, but you are in the same polling center. Go to another polling station. So we saw this. And those who are not registered at all were told, sorry, we don't know whether they were not registered at all or there was a problem. This is something that we done. So for us to come and say fair, it now depends on how the process is concluded. As I was saying in my statement, I was emphasizing that at least at the polling, we have seen that the voters were given the freedom to vote. That was in my speech. I said, now we hope the subsequent processes are going to respect and reflect what the voters have done. This is the collation, the results at the various tallying points, including the national test. So we are yet to come up with the issue of is it fair? But at least at the polling station, we cannot say there was a problem with that the electorate were encumbered from exercising their right to vote, as long as they were identified. That one we are being honest with. At the end of our report, which again is going to come out after the results have our detailed report after the results have come up, that is where we can pronounce ourselves whether now they were fair. But at least the level 3 at the polling stations, that one is evident. Failure of the Kim's kit, did it affect the results? Of course, I've already answered. Unless there was something which we did not observe, that somebody was supposed to vote at that place, but deliberately was turned away or was denied that right. And that is why in our statement we said the layout of the polling station needs to be improved. Because you see, at the entrance you have the person who is identifying. He has the Kim's kit. He or she has the Kim's kit. After this stage, then the person goes and gets the ballot papers. Goes to the booth, votes. After that, places the ballot paper in the appropriate box. Of course, we saw people being assisted, because at times the colors, not easy to identify the colors. They were assisted by the presiding officers or the assistant presiding officer. So now you see the party agents sit on the other side. So the only thing that they see is the voter putting the ballot on us. They have not seen if this is the rightful voter. So we thought it is important in future that at the verification point, the party agents should also be there. They declare, Bwana Kikwete is here to vote. Yes, fine. They also confirm that he's supposed to vote at this point. We think this is the only area. But as I said, the Kim's kit, where there were problems, there were other provisions which we are resorted to, and people were given the opportunity to. Low voter turnout, as I think I've already spoken about it. It's a matter of concern. It's a concern for us, but of course it should be a bigger concern for all the stakeholders in Kenya. Why young people have not registered? Why there is low voter turnout? We've just taken note and flashed it. Now it is, we will try to give a little, but I think the best answers are in the hands of the Kenyans themselves. Thank you.
How about IGAD next? Head of IGAD Mission. Koroma. Sergeant Koroma. Yes. There you.
Thank you very much for the questions, but let me restate that the election process is still ongoing, and there are issues that we believe for now we should not give a categorical answer, because the process is ongoing, and we need to have a complete picture of the entire process before you can give kind of a value statement. Yes, we noted the delay in the disbursement of funds, not that the funds were not made available. There was a delay, so it affected the process in the sensitization and orders by the IEBC and also the civil society. The interrogation on the postponement, of course, I believe that the IEBC have taken
Kwenye kingamuzi cha DSTV, ITV inapatikana kwenye channel 383. Kwenye kingamuzi cha Azam, ITV inapatikana kwenye channel 408. Kwenye kingamuzi cha Zuku, ITV inapatikana kwenye channel 065 na Capital TV kwenye channel 067. Kwenye kingamuzi cha Digitech, ITV inapatikana kwenye channel 1101 na Capital TV kwenye channel 1103.
ITV Daima, Super Brand Afrika Mashariki.
Marumbano ya hoja wiki hii yanakuja na mada isemayo kufunga barabara kudai haki. Je, ni sahihi kudai haki kwa kuvunja haki za wengine?
Ni Alhamisi saa 3 usiku kupitia vituo vyako bora vya ITV Radio 1 na Capital Radio. Usikose.
Kwa wale wote wanaotaka kuja studio kushiriki kipindi mubashara, fika ITV Mikocheni siku ya Alhamis kuanzia saa 1 kamili mpaka saa 2 kamili usiku. Pia unaweza kushiriki kwa kupiga simu studio kwa namba ya simu 0767444701 au kupitia mitandao yetu ya kijamii Facebook, Twitter, YouTube na Instagram ITV Tanzania.
Malumbano ya hoja yanapatikana mubashara kupitia Facebook @ITV Tanzania na YouTube ITV Tanzania.
Marudio ya kipindi hiki utayapata Ijumaa saa 4 kamili usiku katika kituo chako cha Capital TV.
ITV Daima, Super Brand Afrika.